No, I can't
No,
move it.
don't move it. You can
I can
slide
sit.
it
I'll
back
sit on the
anyway.
stool. You almost tried to pull the stool out on me.
Alright, you said just go for it. So
Oh, really?
Back up.
Mic check, check 1 2. Hello, hello. Everybody hear me okay? Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the showcase. Hopefully everybody's doing okay. We have 5 groups for animation project coming up. Yeah, there's going to be 5-minute Q&A. There's going to be a 10-minute presentation and then 5 minutes for Q&A. So feel free to ask questions. The students have about 15 weeks to work on this project, and they start with basically a blank piece of paper. So everything that you see up on screen was their concept, their idea. They worked really hard on these. So yeah, other than that, let's let the presentation begin. Group 1, come on up.
Hello, hello, hello. Cool. All right. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Wallace. I am the director, post-production manager, and modeling and texturing lead for A Healing Feeling.
Howdy, everybody. My name is Alex Lindy Smith, and I was the animation lead and 2D animatic and storyboard artist for A Healing Feeling.
Hello, my name is Darren Vanyo. I was the rigging lead, writer, and voice actor for A Healing Feeling.
Hi, my name is Logan Hunter. I was pre-production manager and 2D artist for A Healing Feeling.
Hi, my name is Justice Fike, and I was the lighting supervisor for A Healing Feeling.
And we have a 6th member who couldn't make it because she is still in Italy, Abby. She will give a brief synopsis of our film before it starts as well. Go ahead and start the video.
Good afternoon. My name is Abby Bennett, and I was the production manager and one of the lighting artists for our short film called A Healing Feeling. I spent the semester working on this project from Florence, Italy, where I am currently studying abroad, so you get to see me projected on the screen instead of on stage with the rest of my group. They're going to present after this video plays, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the conceptualization of A Healing Feeling. The original iteration of it was a lot more chaotic than it ended up being, and a lot of this was for clarity of the story. The basic premise is a depressed man named Ray orders a help bot in order to assist around the house, but ends up being confused by the robot's unorthodox way of quote-unquote helping. It's ultimately a story about friendship and accepting others for who they are, and that's the theme our group was attracted to from the very beginning, even if it took a bit of work to discover what exactly we wanted to do. Initially, we were planning on having a lot more of a montage with 6 to 7 incidents where the help bot is putting band-aids on various supposedly broken objects. We also had a brother that wasn't going to be in the film, but would be the reason the main character has the bot. Our original idea for the ending was that Ray was going to try to call his brother to give the bot back after all of these incidents, and the help bot would have accidentally knocked the phone into a fish tank out of anger, thus somehow leading to our theme of acceptance. Because we couldn't figure out a good method of showing our theme through this ending, and because the brother was added really only as a plot device, both the longer montage and the fish tank ending were scrapped for what became the final version of the film. You can still see the fish tank in some of our early concept art. Thank you, and enjoy.
Huh?
All right. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the film. The direction of A Healing Feeling was planned to be process of Jeff, a lonely, depressed student, discovering true friendship in an unlikely place. Our primary goal was to show a story that left the audience feeling warm inside, and to push the theme of overcoming expectations and building genuine friendships. Some of our concept art shows the layout of the house based on assets we acquired. One of our initial story concepts was to have the house get progressively cleaner and warmer as our characters' friendships grew.
So for storyboarding, our group's intent was to have compositionally interesting and dynamic posing. We also wanted to sell the comedic yet meaningful interactions between Ray and his health bot. So most of our scenes we ended up keeping, but however, we did cut some. So like things that we did cut were like over-the-shoulder carrot shot. We ended up cutting a zoom in on the carrot, and then Ray getting up from his couch to initially go check on his doorbell when the health bot had originally arrived. So we cut those scenes. We ended up cutting them for clarity, and they were pretty much unnecessary content. And overall, we wanted to solidify our audience takeaway from our short film.
With the storyboarding complete, there were only a few differences in making the animatic. A few shots were not added from the storyboard to cut back on incoherence in the flow of the animatic. The priority of the animatic was the camera angles. The idea was to make the animatic the 2D solution for any of our problems when setting up in 3D. This means a lot of early development was based on the animatic. That is why there's so much emphasis on camera angles just to make them look right. This leads us into the process of animation. Each person had one sequence to animate. We start by getting our camera angles and timing set up to match our animatic. After that, we began blocking out our shots and identifying parts that require some more complex movements. For those parts, we would record reference videos of ourselves and use those to guide us. Once we got a good rough draft of every shot, we established a new workflow. We would animate, get feedback on our work, and make tweaks where they were necessary. Sometimes feedback was a little more than just fix this arm or make sure his foot doesn't move like that. To make the story stronger and cohesive, we cut back on excess shots and added in shots where necessary. This is a reoccurring process of cutting and adding shots to better refine the animation.
For the color script, I want to use color to portray Ray's feelings throughout the short. In the beginning, there are darker, cooler colors to show his lonely and depressed mood. Getting towards the end of the short, the environment starts to look warmer as he becomes more friendlier with his new robot friend.
We did most of the lighting in Maya and used some post-processing with Nuke to fix that. And with the lighting, we were trying to create a feeling with the light by having different color temps for different scenes to explain his mood and help show how he changed throughout the animation. And we ran out of time to fully realize the idea for the lighting, so we only got 3 main master lightings for the scenes with some specific shot lighting as needed.
All right. We decided to mostly use pre-made assets based on the time frame we had, and modeled and rigged a few of the other props you can see, such as the cardboard box, watering can, and the Band-Aids. We purchased licenses for a majority of our assets, and the rest were free or modeled and textured. So all materials were recreated from scratch with a process of color, attributes, noise, and bump maps within Hypershade in Maya. We decided to go with colorful Band-Aids, in particular with diversity in mind, and also to keep a colorful, lighthearted tone. We are all proud of what we've accomplished in this project, but we are excited to hear feedback from more than just Justin and Tim. So I will open the floor up to questions.
Hello. I really enjoyed seeing the process work, specifically with the storyboard animatic. And I noticed that the difference between the animatic and the final is that you had the robot spin to like put the Band-Aid on in the final, which wasn't present in the animatic. And I was wondering where that idea came from, because that's really cute.
The spinning was just added for more fun. We just thought it, because like physics-wise, throwing a Band-Aid is cooler than just putting one on, you know? So, yeah, that's why we did that.
All right, I'll start off for over here. So presentation-wise, I kind of like what I saw a few seconds ago, which was how you had overlaid the reference shots to the actual like in-progress animations. I love seeing process for things like this because I think process is very important. For the animation itself in the main character, you talked a lot about like how the character kind of went through like depression or sadness in the beginning and slowly kind of worked through that with the help of his companion. I think the lighting could have been stronger in the beginning to kind of hammer down that fact, but I also think maybe we could have gotten a bit more with that kind of character in his depression state. I didn't feel like I was able to identify that just with what there was alone. But the actions that the character kind of went through to overcome that I thought was very successful, especially with the interactions that the robot had with him. So overall, really good job. I love the emphasis on lighting to tell story and mood.
Thank you very much.
Hey y'all. I don't think any of us have met. So I'm Grace Collins. I use they, them pronouns. I'm from Snowbright Studio, which is up in Cleveland. And thanks for having me as a guest today. First of all, congratulations. It's like a thing, and it's funny, and people laughed, and all that sort of stuff, and that's always, and it's finished, right? Like, and that's always something to take away from it. I thought that there were some really good successes here, especially like the sense of place. It felt like a house. It felt like a place. There were no parts that were a question of like what's going on or things like that. That was clearly communicated. The health bot had a lot of personality, and that's a success there too. As for some of the things that maybe could have been worked on a little bit more, I think Ray's character didn't have that same amount of life and vitality as the health bot. I found myself actually kind of wondering like, well, maybe this would have been more successful with just the health bot, right? And sometimes 3D animators have to make that choice. That's why we got Toy Story first, right, before we got so many other movies, is because that was easy to communicate. I think that the other comment about the depression phase is very well put. I did not get depression from that. I'm bored on my phone, and so if we're telling that kind of narrative, there's probably some additional work that needs to be done to like sell the main thrust of it. And I think that, like I said, there's definitely nothing that takes away from like you had the humor in there and things like that. I think the humor components could have been a little bit tighter, but that's just something that comes about with practice. I think one of the more serious critiques I have though is probably that like from what are you trying to say as this piece of media? And so that's something that I'd probably want to have you think about a little bit more. You have a story where there's a main character who is on their phone, who is disaffected because of that, and then has additional technology disaffection, right? And you have additional technology show up, and then that humanizes him. And for me, that was a little bit conflicting, right? It's like, so is the message of this that technology can remove our addiction to technology? And so I think that finding a way to like dive a little deeper on other work and into that message, because what you've made is great. To make it even more memorable, then I think that the messaging really needs to be there too. So once again, a fantastic job.
Thank you very much.
Again, really great, and we only have a few more seconds, so I'll make it really quick. I would second or third a lot of what was already said, so thank you everybody for saying it. But also I would say one thing to watch out for is that, and I've seen this happen with a lot of student animators, your 2D animatics have such a snappy sense of timing. Like, you know, the robot sprung out of the box. You know, the little sequence at the end where they kind of become comfortable with each other and, you know, the human puts the Band-Aid on the robot is really cute in the animatic and has a nice kind of like quickness to some of the movements. And then when you put it into 3D and you're using a rig, then they start to be very slow and very floaty. So I think that's the thing is like, you know, especially when you're working with these downloaded rigs that are supposed to be for like professional animation, have that, don't let them get in your way. Have them, you know, try to preserve that snappiness. Or if you find they get in your way too much, don't be afraid to 2D animate it if that's where you can get that feeling of life better. You know, don't feel like you need to check off an arbitrary 3D box. Like the 2D will also work and, you know, help get to those emotions.
Hello. All right. So introduction first. My name is Tyler Sisley. I was tasked with animating the entirety of sequence 4 of the animation, as well as portions of sequence 3, and I also arranged the setting of the animation.
My name's Jada Woods. I did animation. I also helped a lot with lighting and sound.
My name is Faisal. I did most of the animation for sequence 3, and I was also the video editor.
My name is Anthony Zurich. I did sequence 2, a portion of sequence 3, and I created the color script.
All right, so we can just start off by go ahead and play the video. the theme. The message we're trying to portray with our story is to face your fears, even if you're scared the whole time. We chose the fear of the dark because it's a very common fear that many people can relate to. The story, the main character Kayla doesn't deal with her fear in the bravest way possible, and that's fine. People don't typically become brave exactly when they need to, you know? Sometimes they just have to run to the nearest solution.
When writing the storyboard, I wanted to write something that a lot of people could relate to, and something that's common and also scary to a lot of people is the fear of the dark. I'd say the main differences between our storyboard and the final animation would be the design of the girl and the monster. Originally, I had a boy in mind when I was designing the main character, which is why I went with the more boy-colored color palette for the room. And for the monster, I wanted to go with something very sketchy. I switched over to a star to match better with the nightlight and just kind of keep things cohesive.
For the color script, it was pretty difficult because how do you apply lighting like that to something that's 98% dark? And I took into consideration the lighting from the moon, as you saw in the animation. And I also wanted to try and apply the cool and warm colors. Like the warm colors, it makes her feel safe. And the cool colors, a bit darker and a bit more mysterious, a bit more serious. And that's pretty much what I wanted to do for the color script.
All right, for the animatic, we all wanted to take what Jada gave us with the storyboard and kind of cement it inside of a kind of animatic form, video form. So we took everything that she gave us and accentuated it. For my process of the animatic, I wanted to kind of, since it was most of the dark scenes, I wanted to push the fear that Kayla is feeling throughout the whole sequence, and wanted to make the monster feel more of like a threat than just something that shows up somehow. We used the animatic to kind of get a feel for the cameras and the lighting.
For our first few passes of the animation, we wanted to really focus on getting our motion as close to real life as possible. So you'll see in a moment here, during our first pass, that we used real life reference, and we tried to follow along as close as possible with our real life references. And as well as acting in those references, we tried to be as animated as possible. You'll also notice in some of our earlier passes, we had red and blue blocks in place for the monster. One of the challenges we faced during this project was time management. So we had a lot of technical issues. Getting the monster in 2D into Maya and just trying to figure out how to combine those two. So in those first few earlier versions of our animatic, or our story, you won't see the monster.
For the first pass, wanted to, even though it was an early pass, we wanted to try and, like the previs, nail home the fear that the girl feels throughout the entire the animation. And it was easy to have like something alongside like the previs to kind of line out our pass and like nail the emotions in the animations before we moved on to the actual animating.
So once we were done with all four of the passes, we moved on to the detailing and lighting. So the lighting kind of happened in like different phases. So we kind of did a first pass before anything else once our animations were done. Then after that, we focused on the detailing. So that's where I came in. We purchased an asset pack, and then we decided to take the room it gave us. We deconstructed that and put it into our own scene, overlapping with all of our reference. When it came to lighting, in the beginning, all the lights were on, so we used a more cool tone, or not, sorry, cool tone. We used a more warm tone to signify that everything's comfortable, everything's fine, nothing's at all is wrong. The mom comes in, turns off the light, boom, everything's dark. Now we use 3-point lighting. Everything's very cool. To maintain a more moody atmosphere. The switch to a darker color setting is meant to let the viewers know that, hey, everything isn't right. The monster's in the scene. There's a sense of fear. So,
I'd also say too, with the cool lighting, trying to light everything in a dark scene and have it feel dark but also lit at the same time was another kind of thing we had to work around.
exactly. All right, that's about all we've got. I'll leave it open to you guys for any questions.
First, I just want to say, good job, guys. This is really nice looking. My one question I wanted to ask was, why did you guys opt for the 2D aspect instead of 3D? I know with the monster, it being 2D, and you guys explained that it was more to represent like that scribbly, like childlike aspect. But I wonder, did you guys consider 3D? Did you guys look for like assets to match your monster at first and then opted to go with 2D because that was a little bit easier on time? Or I guess that's just my question.
We wanted to keep the monster 2D just since the monster is a drawing the child made, and we wanted to keep the idea that this is a drawing throughout the animation.
Yeah, that was that was an idea that was pretty much set in stone from the very beginning. So we just kind of had that thought. We didn't really put like too much like effort to find like a model because, like I said, like from the beginning, that was the whole concept. So we wanted to just kind of drive that home. It actually did prove to be a very big challenge in the process because we were all trying to figure out like how to use the tools that we were given. We were trying to learn Blender Grease Pencil to do this because we were originally going to render it in like Maya itself, but at the end of the day, that turned to be a lot more work than it was worth. So in the end, like it was an idea that we wanted to, like I said, drive home from the very beginning. Proved to be the biggest challenge, but we think it kind of was worth it in the end.
Yeah, I would actually say I preferred the 2D, both for thematic elements, but also because you did some effects with it, like when the monster comes out of the picture, that had a lot of weight and had a lot of good, just like principled animation, and I think that really came through with the monster. And it's nicer to have like a bespoke monster than like you downloaded the Demogorgon from Stranger Things or something, and then you've got like this stylistic thing you have to resolve now. I thought it was overall really nice. I thought it flowed well. I thought the shots were really like made sense from shot to shot. You did fall into like the floatiness on the rig a few times, especially when the girl falls into the she kind of like becomes a board a little bit. She doesn't like crumple into the corner the way you'd expect her momentum to keep making her go. So you might want to polish that up a little bit. But one thing I would add to this that I think would tie the story together a little better. So I really love the idea of like she's drawing her fear, right? And then is posting it on the board as a way to kind of like resolve it. But the monster has a smiley face, so you think she's drawing a friend, and then, oh no, her friend's attacking her. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. I would have it maybe that she's drawing a monster, and then the monster appears. And if you really want to drive that home, too, you might want to add a little thing where like maybe she looks scared as she draws it, and like you have a reaction shot like, ooh, this thing is scary, and maybe her showing mom and mom being like, that's nice, honey, or something, like her trying to be like, this is what's scaring me, and really try to find ways to sell that at the beginning. That way then when the monster attacks, it's not going to be like, wait, what? I thought that was her imaginary friend. So yeah, that's the only thing, but I think overall it was awesome.
I guess just to give you some more context, the original idea we had was she was drawing her nightlight, which is why the monster is also a star. And she likes her nightlight so much because it keeps the dark away. That's at least the idea I had.
It still needs to come through. If it's not coming through, then it didn't work. Like when you do any of these kind of creative things, you've got to make sure if there's an intended message or intended purpose, you almost have to oversell it to sell the idea. Like, because I like that idea. I think it's neat and it wraps up nicely. It's just like, if it's not getting to the audience, how can you shore it up more?
First, I just wanted to say it was very, very well done. I know you guys always have such a short amount of time to do things, and what you were able to accomplish was fantastic. Like, compositionally, all of the scenes, they did feel like, very close-knit. Like, I felt a little claustrophobic at times with the monster closing in, so that was a really nice touch. And I do like how you made the screen, like, go red to show that we were looking in from the monster's perspective. The monster was actually my favorite part about it. It was really like heavy and like it had a lot of like life to it. I was afraid of it. I would have definitely been scared too if I was a little kid. So I thought you all did really well. And it is hard to light a dark scene in an interesting way. And I think playing around with a few more like different colors would be good too in the future. But overall, I think you all did really well, and just be super proud of what you're able to accomplish.
Thank you.
Hi. I just want to go off of what Chris was talking about earlier, where I think, like, especially because you started off your presentation without giving any context, you're just like, all right, let's play the video. And I think you did a pretty good job of actually just establishing what was going on to start out with, because, like, especially when you're telling just a short story without any dialogue, you have to, like he was saying, make sure that overselling it is definitely the right way to put it. I always say, like, when you want to convey a message visually, the number one thing you have to do is just focus on contrasting whatever you need to be the front and center piece as much as you can. And if it's like too much, you realize later that it's too much, you can kind of make tweaks later on. But just kind of going into like that beginning portion where, correct me if I like forgot some element of that opening scene because it's been a while since we watched it at this point, but for a second I didn't realize that the monster was the drawing. And like you're saying, you kind of modeled it after the nightlight, which I thought is like a cool little connection, but I thought it had something to do with the nightlight at some point. Maybe even just having that shot of her kind of like cowering in her bed behind her covers, and then just a shot of her looking at the drawing itself, just to establish the fact that that's what she's scared of. But otherwise, like, the fact that you made the creative decision to animate that drawing in 2D establish it as a drawing, but it made me realize, even if I didn't know what was going on, I knew, like, okay, that's coming out of her imagination. That's not really a real thing. So I think you guys did a really great job with this.
Thank you.
Thank you, lights out.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are the animation team that worked on Rooted Grief, aka the Depression Group. I'm Jen Vivian. I worked on the story as well as the animatic and the animations for Sequence 3.
Hi, I'm Joseph Berlin. I worked on the Sequence 2 and all the video elements.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Hansen. I worked on the final sequence and its lighting.
My name is Snow Morrison. I worked on sequence 1, the concept art, and also the poster.
And now we'd like to show you guys our animation. So our story is about a man who is processing his grief as he journeys to his wife's grave. We adapted the animation from my animation theory final, and the original main character was a dark angel named Kakos, who destroyed every plant that he touched. And his goal was to bring a flower to his wife's grave. The original animation shows a dark figure who discovers he's destroying the world through his grief. And when we adapted the story, we wanted to lean on the aspect of grief and decided to choose 3 of the 5 stages, being anger when he destroys the forest, depression when he thinks back on the memories, and acceptance when he fixes the forest. Similar to death and grief, the forest is changed forever, but will heal over time.
All right. I was going to talk more so about grief. However, Jen did a nice job. I'm just going to re-emphasize some points. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I wanted to talk about the reason why denial isn't seen in the animatic was because we felt like it would have happened before we get to the point where he's already destroying the forest, and since that was the first frame of action, we just decided to not include it in the short. And then bargaining, we skipped it because we felt like he wouldn't try to bargain to get back his dead wife, understanding that there was no way to bring someone back from the dead.
Which, from this point, we can start to begin on the actual changes that we made from the original animatic. The first of which is Kakos himself, going from the original design that Jen made into something a bit more humanoid, which can be seen in the concept art. Then later, we changed the model again to be more of a more brute, more brawler-like figure. This as a easy reference to find a easier and easier model to rig and then create this animation. Other aspects that we changed were the flower itself transforming into a ring, and the various backdrops unifying into more of a hill-like landscape. Furthermore, we included scenes such as the flashback to introduce who Kakos was going to actually see the grave, and then the rebuilding of the forest to emphasize the more feelings of acceptance that he has now finally transitioned into.
For the lighting, we want to have it incorporate with the story along with the time of day to help flesh things out. The first sequence is set in the mid-afternoon, which contrasts the character's anger. when the flashbacks arrive, they're set on multiple days. The flowering scene's set in the morning, the picnic scene's set in the sunset, and the dance sequence set in some ethereal place akin to that of Northern Lights. When the flashbacks end, it is now set in sunset, which is a simmering down of his anger and now accepting of how things are.
We had a few challenges during the actual production of this animation that we ran across. The main one being seen right now. When we had the dance sequence, we kind of felt like having the one camera was a bit dull, so we spiced it up with the differing and moving cameras just to give it more of a sense of movement and less the sense of it just being still. Another issue we came across was the issue with the tree textures, because originally they were very shiny and like a metallic feel, so we had to figure out how to fix that, and then with Justin's help we fixed the alpha on the leaves so that they were actually like they had transparent parts and just not the leaf and then black. And then during the main production, we would submit a video, kind of like what you're seeing now, to Justin every week, and he would make comments on it, stuff we needed to improve upon, and yeah.
Yeah, so during the post-production, we had the animation go through what's called a network render farm. We had some of the shots go into one layer being the beauty pass, while others were separated into the character and the background layer, which was put in Nuke. And we matched the luminance of both of them, added depth of field to add a slight blur to them, and then when they were rendered, they went to Joseph for the editing to go into one project, which at that point we added the leaf border for the flashback so that it would read better for the audience. And we also added the title and the credits. Afterwards, we had the animation go to Justin for the final critiques, which we had several large and small changes and fixes during this process, such as for my gardening scene, when the potted plant would go into the ground, it wasn't fully going into the ground, and it was a dark texture that just didn't look right. So I fixed that by using a beauty pass to have it merge. And then in Nicholas's scenes, when we rendered them, they were Arnold lighting, but we accidentally had them rendered in more of a Maya renderer. So they created this weird staticky effect, which just ended up being really awkward. And these fixes have all led to the final product that we've shown today. So we would like to open it up to questions to the audience.
I felt that the animation, the story was fantastic, read very well. Oh, I had something. What was it? I guess let's keep talking about what I liked about it. I do think that the progression read very well. Walk in, definitely tell he's mad. He sees that the flashback, he softens up, comes back, and then he fixes the tree. What was I gonna say? I guess I just really liked it. What was it? Come back to me. Come back to me.
All right. If you doing it.
Alrighty. So good job. Like Grayson said, I think it reads very well. When you were kind of talking about the background for the project, and you had originally talked about the original animatic that you had for it, I hate to say it, but I almost wish it was that story. I think that story of the idea of somebody who wants to process their grief and understand their loss, but physically can't. Like, that character was trying to bring that flower to the grave of their loved one, but literally they can't, is a very symbolic, but also like a really interesting story technique of showing that struggle and grief, and that the 5 stages of grief, it's kind of a misnomer that people think that's something that the individual who's dying is going through, when in reality, what it was originally created for was it's the stages that people around them go through. And usually you cycle back through over and over and you jump around
and I think that original story did that really well. I think this story does it fine as well, but I think it's not as complex as that original story was. So when you're kind of writing these out, you might want to think, you know, hey, like, does this work better or does this work better? So yeah.
All right, I'm back. So to piggyback off the story, I was gonna say I think with the story being solid, I think the environment could use some work to match it, because the trees were just kind of on a plane. I feel like you just put some bushes, I don't know, something about the backgrounds to make that like destroying a forest. If like the forest has even more beauty to it, that destruction also has more impact for it. So if you just spice up the scenes, just environment-wise, I think it's just super good. But you know, it already is super good. So yeah, that's all I had.
I kind of just wanted to piggyback off of that. I think it would have symbolized a lot if the tree that he ended up knocking down had some sort of like carved symbol that they made together. So he ended up destroying that and then putting it back up because he doesn't want to forget her and something like that. But overall, I think the story was really strong and it was really good.
Actually, on that note, we thought about that and talked about that last week. However, it was too late that we could not go back and fix that.
Hey there. I think that conceptually this one probably needed a little bit more work. The original storyboard and the original pitch, I'm all in on. You know, the burning flower, the inability to process, and I think that was very well stated elsewhere. I think that what came out was a little bit out of order and was struggling a little bit to communicate what was going on here. We see at the start a warrior come in and destroy stuff. We see graves. That's leading us down the wrong narrative, I think, compared to where you were trying to go with it. And I think the flashback, we try to avoid flashbacks sometimes, right? Lay the groundwork in advance. The flashback, I think, really particularly struggled too because I'm assuming it was a technical limitation of being unable to change their costumes and their outfits, right? And so when you have two people dancing and they're both in like warriors gear, high fantasy gear, it's a rough one there. So sometimes when you're telling a story, you have a story that you really want to tell, and I think you had a really good story there. And then sometimes you run into technical limitations, and that's really an invitation for creativity, right? To try and see what can I do within the confines of what I'm given. And yeah, I think that's mostly what I wanted to say. You wanted to add something?
A lot of what Grace said over here is very, very akin to what I was going to say, which is that you have a couple of disconnects going on. First, within the tech, like you said, having two high fantasy characters, I was looking more like, okay, warrior druid, because she's planning things, but that's not really what we're going for. We're going for more of like a domineering male figure with, you know, who is destructive in nature and can't really maintain that ability to control their anger, and you have somebody that grounds them. I almost wish if you had these contrasting forces that we saw more of that anger, right? If you're gonna do a flashback, do something where the flashback has meaning, like in between the scenes of the dance, make dramatic cuts to him destroying trees, right? He can't dance with his wife anymore. Him processing his grief is going to be the destructive force that he is naturally akin to, right? That also kind of opens up the doors to using dramatic movement and telling a story that way. I feel like we compartmentalize grief too much. Getting through grief is hard. Sometimes you spend months at one stage. Sometimes you spend months angry, and you can't accept it in one evening at a grave. Stick with that narrative. It's okay if it doesn't have an acceptance at the end. It can just be sad, because that's what you're trying to tell.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh yeah, this works. Hello, this is group 4, aka the arcade group. Our animation is high score, and I'm Sandy Rao. I worked on sequence 1, sequence 2, did some more 2D character animation here and there, and I worked on the 3D parts of the animation project as well.
My name is Chris Dibble. I worked on sequences 2 and 3 and the pixel art portions.
Hello, my name is Damiana Johnson, and I worked on some of the 2D animation and some of the graphics for sequence 4.
All right, and we're good for the thing to be played.
Well, our animation is about a young boy coming into an arcade, finding out that his high score was beaten. Throughout the story, they compete with each other in different games. Their competition ends without a winner because at the end, they become friends through the fun they had.
The theme of our story is that friendship and having fun is more important than winning, which is why a winner is not announced in the final game.
After the story and theme was decided, I worked on a quick draft of the storyboard. Since we didn't have the designs for the characters yet, I drew generic stand-ins for the boy and robot. And if you're able to see what's going on in the storyboard boxes, you could probably tell that some things we had initially changed in the final iteration. For the first half stayed the same for the most part. It's mainly the last half that we did more of the editing on.
Knowing the robot would have a more complex design than the boy, we got to work on their design first, each of us taking our own attempt at it before melding our attempts into one to use for a final version. We strived for something that was familiar, yet distinct from the boy's design.
While working on the boy, initially we wanted the boy to lean more on a futuristic style because at the beginning we want the story to take place in the future. But we then settled on him to look more 80s style, right here, and we designed him to contrast from the robot character and to provide a human element to our story. In the first sketch I made, I put him in a futuristic spacesuit, but then I didn't like how it looked at it, so I looked up more 80s clothing and I went with a colorful jacket. I tried on different color schemes for him. Before, I was initially going to put him in a red jacket to maybe have him compare with the robot.
With our character designs decided on, we put together our animatic, and at this point of the story, we strive for more visual clarity in our storytelling above all else. So as you can...
Yeah, there's like could probably see that, a lot of the backgrounds were just quick 2D sketches, and we were gonna like work on putting in the 3D stuff later. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's the fighting one. Yeah, the sprites look a little different here, you can see.
Yeah.
Well, when we was creating the animation, we decided on 3 classic games to show, and we wanted each one to be distinct from each other. For one of them, the car sequence, had a lot of animation to go with, and we thought the car sequence was going to be the easiest to make. And we knew that the dance sequence was going to be hard, so to make that happen, we did mostly on 3s. And to help me to save on time, I covered up the boy with the robot at the end. And we wanted the characters to be 2D animated to showcase our artistic style. And before we had like a lot of changes, but to get it done, we had to make some cuts at the end before.
Yeah, also a lot of us are better at doing 2D than 3D.
For the graphics, I made my pixel art in Photoshop, making initial sketches in Procreate before moving them over for a final pixel art version. Let's see. Considering our aesthetic, I was not afraid to get very wild with our colors.
I helped with some of the graphic for the animation. When I was creating the dance game, I was inspired on some Dance Dance Revolution game from the 90s. Their style was a bright and bold color, and as you can see, I picked out some pink and gray sequence, and I thought adding some stars would be good. In the background, when I picked the pink and green sequence, I used a blast kind of animation in After Effects. I made a rough graft for the blue swirled format to give it a more psychedelic look that you see mostly in DDR games. When I was looking up some background information for high score arcade scores.
Oh yeah, the color script. So for the color script, I picked a palette that I thought would fit each scene. The most obvious color choices being the bright yellow background for the winner and the drab gray background for the loser. I pretty consistently worked with a more saturated color scheme for the most part since, well, I like saturated colors, but also it works well for the 80s aesthetic we were going with.
For the simplicity of our background, we decided to use a number of 3D assets to populate our arcade space.
And after we bought the assets, I did a simple and straightforward layout of the arcade. The 2D characters would be imported into the scene as planes, and the image sequence box would be enabled so that the characters are able to move while the timeline is playing on Maya. This was only done with the scenes that involved the 3D background, of course. As you could see, there were a few scenes in the animation with just flat colors in the background and simple shapes, and those could just be done in yeah, those could just be done in Clip Studio. So, yeah, also we use Clip Studio to do the animation. And after that, after the scenes were finished in Maya, I would render the characters and background on a separate layer, and then import them into Nuke to composite. Nuke gave me a lot of time from re-rendering in Maya if a mistake was made. So if a character was not in the correct place, instead of needing to re-render everything in Maya again, I'd use the transform node to move the characters in Nuke. I don't know if you know this, but the screens on the arcade, they weren't there in Maya. I put that all in with Nuke using like the transform node and color, what was it called? I think it was like corner pin or something, but I used that to put the screens in because I didn't feel like putting things in on Maya again and re-rendering the whole thing. Yeah.
While everything was said and done, I took every animation we did and I put it in Premiere Pro. I did some editing on it, and it took me like at least 2 days to find each and every audio that I wanted to make. When you heard the robot laugh, it wasn't actually something I could have find, so I just took a robotic voice saying 5, sped it up, and then I just slow-moed it. And hopefully after everything was done, we finally had a chance to rest after a while.
Yeah. So now that our presentation is over, we're open for Q&A.
For when designing the CPU character, were you considering making her 3D?
Do you want to talk about that? I could also.
Well, we just wanted everything to be fully 2D animated because we just loved our character design so much that we just didn't want to change it.
Yeah, and, like, it's a lot more difficult to find a 3D model that matches what you're going with a character design than to just having it all done in 2D to exactly how you want it to look.
I have no questions. I just want to say that was the coolest flippin' thing ever. Great job.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all, that was fantastic. So awesome job. I think that you really used what you had access to, and I think you made absolutely the right choice to say you had a style and it had a distinctiveness to it, and you stuck with it, and that really carried through. I think you made some really smart choices too about doing these tight shots in there, and that both limited the work that you had to do and gave it even more style. So that was all fantastic. I think the one main criticism I guess I have, or maybe more question, is what is the message that you were trying to get out of it? Because at the end of this, at the end of the day, what you have is a human, and it looked from your storyboards like you had another human, and that would have sold me on the friendship piece. But you switched it up for technology again, kind of like the first one, right? And so really it seemed more like a human coming to terms with computers, and that's where you kind of lost me at the end of it, right? Because if the concept really, to take something from like a good thing that we've seen to something that's like really memorable, like the concept needs to stick with you too. So that's the one part maybe that could have gotten revisited a little bit, but really, really awesome work, y'all.
Yeah. First of all, the use of color and everything was gorgeous. Very stylized. I loved everything from that perspective and the creative decision. I will kind of agree that the robot is an interesting choice. I think that a robot could work, but the robot has to be the personification of an actual CPU or the machine that you're competing against. I think it could have been successful just being another person in the arcade, and that kind of sells the idea of friendship too. Yeah, but overall, I would say very well done. I think the shots were very well executed. I think the dancing was something that could have been choreographed off maybe other like DDR-esque dances or something like that to kind of fit the machine a little better. But overall, well done.
Yeah, I just want to say I really do love the character designs, especially the robot. What inspired you to go for like the arcade and video games in general for the story?
Well, I just thought the arcade are just something I just love about them, and I was just walking to class like, what if I just made a story about two kids competing in the arcade? And that was just it, really.
So I wanted to reflect that, like, I loved that. It was nostalgic, you know, and we had to kind of chuckle over here because you were like, we had to figure out this noble time of the '80s, and I'm like fading into old dust. But no, I mean, it had that like good synthy music, like the whole aesthetic was so well put together. You could tell that you did a lot of reference work. And I really commend you on how you, everybody's been saying like it was smart that you went with the style that you know. It was smart that you went with a style that you know, that you're comfortable with, that you could get the most out of. But very seriously, nothing got in my way of like enjoying that. There wasn't the kind of like, oh, our limitation on the you know, this asset or that asset or this thing we downloaded. No, you got everything emotionally that you wanted out of that, and you know, I mean, I'm gonna say it like this. Don't feel compelled, everybody, to feel like you need to check off a Maya box, and that's not me like going to war with it. Like Maya's fine. Like I love 3D animation, but sometimes I do see people get held back by it because like they can't work a rig to its full extent, and doing that's okay. Like going to the 2D, going to what you know is okay. You know, don't feel like you have to arbitrarily hit some sort of technological milestone when, like, you got the emotion out, you got the meaning out, you got the story out, and I could just kind of sit back and like take that in, like take in the pixel. My God, the pixel art on that was awesome. It was like, I'm like, yeah, that's like a good cartoon video game, especially after watching that X-Men '97 episode with Jubilee. I don't know if people go watch X-Men '97, but like, you know, it was a nice comparison to that. So.
Hello, hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Jordan Frederick, and as you can see, we're two people, so we kind of split all of our responsibilities evenly.
We did. I am Ray Lumley, and
Yeah. I have a quick question for all of you guys. What's better than one mummy? Two mummies! Roll the footage. All right, this is our outro music. You guys ready?
we're professionals.
Thank you. That was some incredible singing.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, two-person group. So, a lot of our decisions and design choices in general for the entirety of every choice we've made in that film would be around having to simplify and streamline a concept. So we really, I'm sure everybody in this room can resonate with it. We're both creatives, and we really like the idea of having that moment where you put something into the world and you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks, I hate it. Or you're just aggressively trying to make it better and more appealing.
but then you're always gonna find that one person that resonates with it and goes, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So we really wanted to center this idea of like two creatives finding a community together, and those creatives happen to be two mummies in a spooky graveyard because we found a really nice rig called the Tep rig, and that's where we kind
Highly
of went in.
recommend it. We started off storyboarding. We actually just met at a coffee shop and sat down, and we each did like, Jordan did a frame, I did one, Jordan did one, I did one, and then we took that, and with the animatic, we decided to just split it half and half because that would make it easy. I did the first half, Jordan did the second half, and then we moved on from there to animating.
Yeah, and in the animating, we kind of continued that passing off because then I went and keyed the first half, and you keyed the second half.
And then we switched it, and I did the second half, and Jordan did the first half, and then we were advised not to do that.
Yeah, apparently that's not industry standard to keep passing the scenes between two people, but we were having fun with it. We both got our hands on the animation on all parts of the video, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. What I really like especially, though, is Ray, some of the modelings they did was...
We did. I did. At the beginning, I really wanted to go crazy with modeling and texturing because I really love that kind of stuff, but I realized with the two-person group time standards, I had to lower my standards for it. So I made the tree and the pumpkin and then found low poly rigs or models that were would fit the theme of like the comic-y style we're going for. And then I retextured all of them and edited some of the models we found to better fit our story.
Yeah, and then I went in and did some of the lighting work for it. I wanted to keep it very consistent through the scenes. We have the one area in the entire short, and we kind of have this bit of this sitcom setup with the camera so that it's just facing like directly. There's no turnarounds because we didn't want to have to model the other half of the scene. And the lighting we wanted to keep consistent too, but also keep that sort of Halloween, cutesy, spooky styling that we had with the orange, green, and purple color scheme.
Yes.
A lot of the style choices came from the fact that we found the Tep rig and we wanted to build outward from that stylistically.
Yes, we definitely, the Tep rig was definitely like a monumental like starting point for our animation and helped us build our idea off of it.
Yeah, and then the 2D graphics too that you laid on top, the little fun finishing touches we had.
Yes, I wanted to add just another layer of communication with the audience of what's going on, and just to add another touch of cute little comic-y items to it, and yeah.
And then lastly, we had to wrap it up with the sound work, which was something we weren't expecting to do, but oddly was probably the most fun I had with the whole project.
It was great.
If you couldn't tell already, the beautiful voices you heard in the film were in fact Ray and I, and a bunch of sound effects we had to gather. But there was a lot of, there was the SMS, the Student Media Studio at the base of the library on the main campus. If you're ever there, go check it out, go get some stuff done. They have a wonderful like
audio recording booth.
They have an audio recording booth that we accidentally knocked the light over in.
Destroyed the place.
Yeah.
Really.
So don't scream too loud in there, like I did.
Yeah.
But it was a really fun experience to just do takes in an audio booth for our project.
Yeah.
I thought that was really unique. And then we got to put all the sounds together and edit it and format it and create what we have here.
Yeah.
Together. Well, it's not, but you know,
Yeah.
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 So that is sort of our whole process. I thought this class was awesome. I really enjoyed what we made. And
I feel like we started off strong and ended really strong, and it just took off. It's good.
And we'd love to open it up to any questions anybody has.
Yes, please.
What was up with the first pumpkin?
What was what?
What was up with the first pumpkin? How?
It's just a really solid pumpkin.
It's like
okay.
We had a wood pumpkin that you had.
I did. In our references we recorded, I have this massive, like 3 foot, 2 foot tall solid wooden pumpkin we used, and it was just kind of like we were hitting it with sticks as the weapons, and they were all shattering, and it was just kind of perfect for what we were going for.
So we'll say that it's a solid wood pumpkin in
Solid
film
wood
as well.
pumpkin.
So, awesome. First of all, amazing. Excellent timing because, again, like, I think it can be very tough sometimes to get some of that comedic timing with, like, rigs and other stuff like that. But I think you did a really good job, like, with the squash and stretch and having the character, like, kind of smear across the frame a little bit and some of that stuff. So you weren't afraid to let something happen, like, really, really fast. You weren't like trying to let the tween. You weren't worried about making everything make like some logical sense. It was just like, okay, it has to snap because it's a cartoon and it's a silly cartoon. And you weren't afraid to get silly. That was the other thing. It's like you weren't afraid for the cartoon to get silly. You did the a cappella ending, which was glorious. So like I really love what you did here. I think it's great. You had like some good Looney Tunes puns, which I think were awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Hi. I loved it. It was great. A lot of times I feel like you can really kind of feel the radiating energy of people who like love what they do and just kind of put it out there to get it out there in a deadline. And this had all the core features of what felt like a passion project, or like I loved being able to do this. Bit surprised by the fact you passed animations off back and forth. If you were to tell me like you did that before, I wouldn't have been able to tell, because it felt like there was a lot of cohesion coming together with your animation, and there was a lot of fundamental principles that I feel like you guys did well that played to the comedic aspect. So kudos to you for that. Very, very hard to get those timings down, and I really felt like the cartoony aspects were strong and really played to the humor that you were going for. One thing I will say, and it's like a bit towards the, I would say towards the beginning of things, to me it felt like a little bit, I don't know, it's like slow. Maybe that was just me like trying to figure out where things are going, but once like the comedy started coming into there, it made absolute sense. Maybe that's where like having a bit more help with like the environment and flushing that out does come into play, but I think you made the most that you could with the rig, and turning that rig into like a second character was really smart for telling that story.
Hey y'all, I'm here. I used to live in Appalachia, and we used to get pumpkins from an actual farm, and I agree with the pumpkin situation in this, because if you got a wild pumpkin before, it's got like this much on it, and cutting into it is a devil. So I felt for it. I think that probably the biggest critique I could give you is that things started to fall apart a little bit in the end. It wasn't immediately clear kind of what was going on there as things were wrapping up, and again, like why things had changed, how the second person really kind of like connected with it. And I think probably a couple more iterations and maybe a couple extra weeks of like revisions on the concept, and how do we get the payoff, because the payoff wasn't really there at the end, right? But the buildup was great, and yeah, the timing was great, and I think that you really brought that model to life, and that's all, as we've seen, that's a really hard thing to do. So I think you made the right choice given the limited team and limited time, investing in bringing that character to life instead of fixing up the background a bit more and stuff like that. So you focused in, and I think it paid off for y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do my little bag.
It's 3:30. Yeah. So we'll take a brief break, and we'll pick up at 3:30. So So less than 5 minutes, or slightly more than 5 minutes, and we'll resume with capstone.